Hi, thanks for joining me and welcome back to the channel. Now, before I go on, I've just got to say an absolute massive thank you to all of my new subscribers and all of my old subscribers. Since the last video, I hit 5,000 subscribers. I'm now over 5,100 subscribers. It's amazing. And I think we have 12,000 plus views on the last video about the Cure album. And while we're on the subject of the Cure, as I mentioned in that video, I have ordered the double LP Miles Showell cut. I can confirm now that is actually two 33 RPM discs, so it's not 45 RPM, it's just the same album spread over four sides, which will be interesting to hear. And I've ordered the CD special set, so to speak, extended set or whatever it's called, which includes obviously the regular Red Book 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz CD version, and also a 2496 version, which is also on Qbuzz, and I have downloaded that, so I've got that as well now, which sounds great. I don't mind being a spoiler on that. And I've also on that disc there's a Dolby Atmos cut, which will be interesting to hear, because rumours are that one is quite different. And I've also ordered the cassette, so why not? Let's just listen to everything basically. But frankly, they have not been dispatched yet from the Cure shop. Goodness knows when they do. So when they turn up, I'll get on with that video and make it. But they haven't turned up yet, and there's no sign of them being dispatched soon. But what has turned up in this last week, which I was delighted to receive, is the long-awaited, I think it was initially scheduled for April this year, but the long-awaited Analogue Productions Atlantic 75 45 RPM cut of Genesis Nursery Cryme, their third album released in 1971. And Genesis, as regular viewers will know, Genesis, it was my first favourite band. First gig I ever went to see was Gabriel. Genesis, like a month or two after. I think the first album I had was Trick of the Tail, then Wind and Wuthering, Selling England by the Pound, Foxtrot. To be honest, I lost count at that point, but I would have got my first copy of Nursery Cryme sometime during 1980, and I would have bought it new, and that would have come on the blue label. Now, before I get into this, what I want to do is just run through a brief history of Charisma Records and their labels and pressings, etc., because my quest for the ultimate Nursery Cryme sort of took place over about 30 years, to be perfectly honest. And I'll just tell that little story because it's kind of, and when you realise that, you'll see where this fits into it, and thereby how really good or not it is. Okay, so I'm just going to dive back into a little bit of history of my journey into Nursery Cryme now. Now, I'll just point out, I've got two copies here. These are my sort of long-term copies, but I'll get onto those. Now, the first copy of Nursery Cryme I ever bought, as I said, it was new in 1980, and I don't have it anymore, but I want to find you an example of the label that it came on, okay? So this is what I refer to as the Charisma Blue label, and I believe this was first introduced in 1980. So my blue Nursery Cryme was on this label, and Nursery Cryme isn't, it isn't the world's most audiophile type of recording. It's obviously it's very analog. It's a little bit sort of murky in comparison with one of their later recordings, like say Trick of the Tail, for example. So it's no great surprise that it didn't knock me out. The music knocked me out, but I kind of at a certain point during my life realised that actually, it wasn't automatically best to go out and buy a new copy of an album, because that might not be better sonically than an old copy of an album. Now, what came before the blue label was a small hatter. Now, a small hatter, I just want to show you that, and I'm going to show you the difference between a small and a large hatter, because this is all really relevant on your search for, not just Nursery Cryme, but any of the 70s era Genesis albums. Now, that's a small hatter. This is my original copy of Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Now, you'll notice the Lamb Lies Down on side 2 and side 4, there's kind of like a custom label. The same occurred with Seconds Out. So, what I'll say refers to all of the 1970s Genesis albums, with the exception of Seconds Out, okay? But this is, this is a small hatter label. Now, you can see how far away from the spindle hole the hatter's hand is, okay? Now, when we get to show you a large hatter, you'll see that his bow tie and his hand actually touch the spindle hole. It's very, very obviously different. But, you need to kind of get this sort of into your memory. Now, the small hatter was introduced, I believe, in August 1974. So an original pressing of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway will be on a small hatter. I don't believe there was ever a large hatter version of The Lamb. So, Genesis fans, your original Lamb, Trick of the Tail, Wind and Wuthering, and then there were 3, will all be on a small hatter label. There are various things sort of over the course of this that subdivide it. This one here says marketed by B&C Records. These things, that specifies this as August 74 to July 75. Other little bits of text will kind of further define the era, so to speak. But these are just quick, easy, recognisable things which kind of go along with the, looking at the label, the matrix numbers. So it's not always hard and fast. I've got, for instance, an original press of Nick Drake's 5 Leaves Left on a pink rim island rather than the pink label island, but it's the same, you can tell it's the same pressing because it's the same plates. You can tell that from the matrix numbers. Anyway, a large Mad Hatter is what preceded the small Hatter, and the large Mad Hatter was the original label for Foxtrot, Genesis Live, and Selling England by the Pound. And here we have a large hatter, and as I said before, you can see the bow tie actually is clipped by the spindle hole, and his hand is virtually touching it. Okay, so the large hatter that ran from September 72 to July 74. And again, it's just, if you know when an album was first released, you can almost at a glance sort of know what the original label will look like, and then, look for the appropriate thing. Okay, that's the large hatter. Now, obviously, Nursery Cryme came out before September 72, so what is the label that preceded the large hatter? And what that is the pink scroll, I call it. And here we have a pink scroll label. This will be the original label that you would have seen on Trespass or Nursery Cryme. The pink scroll ran from 1969 through until September 72. For real kind of the geeks amongst us. You can see this has, you may be able to see here, manufactured and distributed by B&C Records Limited, right along the bottom there, and that came in July 1970. Okay, so I've got Those are the only two Genesis albums, Nursery Cryme and Trespass on this label, but you'll find Lindisfarne, Van de Graaff, Generator, other charisma artists of the era will be on this label too. So that's kind of what I would suggest is the holy grail to look for of Nursery Cryme. Now this is the first copy I got of this, and I mean, I don't know if you can see it's in pretty good shape. It's probably VG between VG and VG plus, maybe VG plus on side 2 and VG on side 1. I'd suggest, and sadly it's got a little sticker removal thing on the front cover, and then subsequently, of course, this is the way it goes with me, the ongoing search for the kind of holy grail almost. So you're always looking for that elusive mint original pressing, and I would say this one is actually probably, it's close to near mint. It really is. So that's my current sort of reference playing copy. I'll show that close up. If you can see, it's in superb shape and it sounds phenomenal. Anyway, do take a look, because this is the original, and you'll notice there the famous Charisma label. Okay, so what I want to do now is very briefly, I'm just going to return to the Analogue Productions one, because I want to show you the label in here. Now, you know, the cover is very similar. As you can see, actually, it's a bit, the original is a bit more yellowy than the new one. And, you know, I've got 2 of those, so we can kind of see it's not just one or the other, it's consistent. So it's a little bit more yellowy on the original, a bit more sort of golden, sort of a richer kind of hue. But you know, other than that, it's a very accurate and authentic reproduction of the cover in, you know, superb, nice thick quality card. It is textured like the original, and the label, I just want to show you, is of course this is an Atlantic 75 release by Analogue Productions. It's not a Charisma release. Now, I think Charisma was bought by Virgin at some point, but you can see here they've kind of made a, you know, sort of facsimile of the original label, but it's not, you know, it doesn't say the Charisma label, it just says Genesis. It's, I presume, sort of, you know, maybe Charisma own, or Virgin or whoever owned the copyright to that label and label design, I don't know. And this is you know, as close as they can get it, but it's nice that they've, you know, made some effort to reflect what the original looked like there. So I'll get onto the sound of these in a minute, but what I first of all want to talk about is the sound of those originals. Now, as I say, Nursery Cryme, it's not the world's, you know, it's definitely not what I would call an audiophile recording. It's a little bit sort of soft. It's a little bit murky, but I mean, you know, I'm picking hairs here, but basically my original Blue Label copy, I loved the music, but it never sort of, you know, it didn't punch me like Trick of the Tail did, sort of dynamically. I think it just sounded a little bit murky in comparison with the later mixes, the later albums. And I'd say the same about Trespass, which incidentally the first copy of Trespass I ever had was on the Blue Label too. And then I think, I'm pretty sure I heard a friend's Nursery Cryme, and he had it as I think it was a large hatter, but it may have been the small hatter. But anyway, it was a notably earlier pressing than my one. And even without hearing them side by side, I could tell it was better. So, you know, I've described this before, but, you know, hence the search started for that elusive, you know, sort of mint original pressing. And having discovered that the pink label existed, because I hadn't even ever seen one at that point in time, I just thought, right, well, I want the ultimate, I'm going to look for a pink one. And as I say, this this copy here was the first one I got, and I could tell, even though, as I say, it's probably VG. I think side 2 is probably VG plus, but side 1's VG. There's a reasonable amount of noise, or just pops, but clean kind of pops. But you can hear through that to hear the clarity of the sound stage, the layering of the information. If you think about let's talk about the musical box, how it opens, and you've got this ring, 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 and then the vocal starts, play me, oh King Cole. And for part of that, there's I don't know if it's double tracked or backing vocal, but I think there's a backing vocal, probably Phil, very quiet in the background behind that. That I may join with you. And then you can hear Gabriel right back from the mic. All your hearts now seem so far from me. And then he comes back in, and then off to the left, you've got a backing vocal on the left as well. Again, which I think is Phil, but it's just the expression and the anguish just in those 4 lines almost. But a little bit later on, when you've got "Play Me My Song," and he sings that over and over again. But each time, sort of anguish almost builds in his voice, and you're really listening to Gabriel's voice as it's utterly captivating. It pulls you in, but it's not forward in the mix, and it's something that if it's not a really, really, really good cut, pressing, whatever, you can just sort of appreciate the song maybe for the powerful parts at the end, and obviously tracks like Return of the Giant Hogweed, which is actually probably my favourite track on the album, and Fountain of Salmacis. Brilliant. But it is it's very theatrical, the record, and to get the real best out of it, you want a good pressing, and that's why I hunted down eventually, and got this one, which I say is I'd hesitate to say it's near minus, probably would be a good guess of how you would describe the condition of this. And it is it's more natural, it's more layered, it's more vivid, it's more solid. It's phenomenal compared with all later pressings. Now, this is not an easy thing to find. I've looked on Discogs, and they seem to be, sort of VG pluses around sort of £100 to £200. Well, I think this is probably better than the VGs, but I think you'd have to spend £200-300, maybe even more, to get a copy this good. And the later pressings, as I say, they do lack. As simple as that. Now, I think now is the time that we'll get onto this, the Analogue Productions. Now, I'm going to put it back in its little bag, just so it's obvious what we're talking about. Otherwise, I'm just holding up 2 record covers that look identical, and it all gets very confusing. So it's cut from an original tape. I'm not entirely certain which tapes these will be, but I think this is kind of quite relevant. The original is, Genesis. They're a UK band. It's on a UK label, recorded in the UK at Trident Studios, I think it was mastered at Trident as well. So, the original master will be a Trident Studios original master. The original master for the US version, which was on Atlantic, and this is why we've got this as part of the Atlantic 75th anniversary series, will have been a copy of that UK master, presumably made at Trident or some other tape duplication house in the UK. And I'm, almost certainly that would have been a Dolby master at 15 IPS, if you think about the time of when this was. But it's going to be a generation down, and this will have been cut from that. Incidentally, it's cut by Chris Bellman at Bernie Grumman Mastering, and it's really, really, really nicely cut. I would say that there are subtle ways in which I prefer the original to this, but there are also quite unsubtle ways in which I prefer the Atlantic 75th version over the UK OG. Okay? Now, I'll try and explain what they are, but I think what I want to say first of all is really quite important, because I started this off, I mean, first of all, it is a favourite album. I've played this hundreds and hundreds of times over the last 50 years, say, okay? Not that particular copy, but I've had this particular copy at least 10 years, I think, all right? So when I put this one after, and immediately there's like more clarity, like I said, in the sort of the ring, ding, 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 and then the vocal starts. Now, immediately, my first impression was the vocals sounded a little bit sort of hollow and cupped, and a bit sort of distant, just not to my taste, really. And after that initial vocal bit, then there's a flute solo. Now, again, my first impressions were the flute didn't sound as fluty as on the original. It was kind of almost, is it a flute? Is it an oboe? I'm not sure. And then you've got sort of very kind of strong, very forward in the right channel, Tony Banks keyboards, and in the left channel guitar, Steve Hackett. This is the first, I'm sure Genesis fans know, but this is the first album that had Steve Hackett on guitar and Phil Collins on drums and backing vocals. So it's, some people would think of it as the first album in the classic Genesis lineup. I mean, that I'd probably agree with that, although I think Trespass is also an amazing album. And for that matter, I'm quite a fan of From Genesis to Revelation. I think they've, I love the band, certainly up until 1980. Anyway, so that initial impression, and it stuck for a few days, to be honest. And then I came down with quite a heavy head cold, and it was really quite hard to sort of, I was making pages and pages of notes and talking about how it felt chesty and congested and all the rest of it. And that's kind of part of the reason why this video's been delayed a little bit, because I couldn't really get my head around what was going on, and I couldn't sort of put it to the acid test, so to speak. So I've probably sort of done an A/B between the two, at least half a dozen times, at least. And as I say, on the first listening, I thought it was a good second place to the original Pink label, probably about level with a large Hatter, maybe a small Hatter. Okay, now, for $60, that's not all that bad, because it's a brand new record, and you find a literally mint, unplayed mid-70s pressing a Nursery Cryme for $60. I think you'd struggle. So in pure value for money terms, it was pretty good, but it wasn't beating this, not in every respect anyway. There was no question right from the word go. Dynamically, the loud passages, I mean, the second half of the musical box, Fountain of Salmacis, for instance, it was, this is mind-blowing. There's no question. It's way more dynamic. And in those bits where, it really gets going, it's far less muddled than the original. But the original is an absolutely beautiful, homogeneous, analog, wonderful example of prog at its absolute finest, I would say. But anyway, what I want to really explain here is after several listens, and I have to say I did clean, I repeatedly cleaned these and the original over and over in my Degritter Mark II, using pure distilled water, I will add, and I'm going to get back onto another record cleaning video in the not too distant future. I have actually got another interview with Steve Evans recorded, and I just need to edit and put my thoughts together on that. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, first impressions not automatically knocked out. It seemed a little bit sort of mid-range sucked out. And the funny thing is, what I then experienced is I just turned it up in volume and up and up. And there's a point where this one, particularly the crescendos, it just became a bit messy. It was too messy. The sort of heavy organ, heavy guitars. It just gets a little bit muddled and confused. With this one, you can turn it up and up and up. And as you turned it up, the presence and the kind of the wholeness, if you like, of Gabriel's voice really sort of formed and positioned in the soundstage properly where it should be. And actually, when you sort of get up to playing it pretty loud, and I was using, I've got a sound pressure level meter app on my phone, SPL Pro, I think it's called, and just sort of holding that on my lap in the listening position. It's useful to sort of, gauge where you're at in volume, especially if you're doing A/B dems between two different pressings, just to make sure you've got the volume at a similar level. But on this one, I was hitting over 99 dB peaks, which is pretty loud, but it didn't sound loud at any time. It just sounded like, bloody hell, this is amazing kind of, thing. And I think that's, again, it's one of the things about this pressing that's just like, wow. And so basically over the course of about a week and playing it maybe sort of 6 or 7 times, both copies side by side, I've included this one as well, so some instances 3 copies. It really has sort of solidified my position or feelings about it, but it has also changed. And basically, over the course of that week, this one has kind of improved, in my opinion. It's like matured, like a fine cheese. And I think part of that is inevitably going to be that, I've got 40 years of listening to this one, so there's that kind of acoustic memory and like familiarity. So whereas this one might have initially sounded a bit sort of scooped out and unnaturally open, you certainly become, with a few plays, to realise that actually no, it's not colouring Gabriel's voice, it's not missing the expression on Gabriel's voice. These are all things that I thought right at the start. It's just more transparent. So yeah, basically now at this point in time, I would say this one, the Analogue Productions Atlantic 75 anniversary, is my favourite pressing, full stop, bar none, even eclipsing the original. Now, there is a little proviso on that, and I mentioned the volume thing earlier on. If you're playing it a little bit quieter than, say, 99 odd dB, which, frankly, I can only do that when my neighbours are out. It's not the most sociable thing to play your music, incredibly loud. So if I'm kind of just more like a casual background listen, a sort of more relaxing listen, or the neighbours are in, or someone else is in the house, I think this one sounds better because it is slightly more compressed. That brings the sort of the loudest sections and the quietest sections of the music closer together, but it also sort of kind of increases the impression of drama, the impression of contrast, this one, when you're playing it a little quieter, does sort of almost lack that body, and therefore, for me, I mean, I will, I'm not going to get rid of this original. So, for me, these two are the keeper. But in terms of, absolute outright sound quality, and I really wanted to point out that first impressions thing, because, I know some of you might go out, you might buy it, you might put it on and think, oh God, no, it sounds different to my original. It doesn't. or it sounds, you know, hollow or cool or cold or brittle or whatever. Persevere with it. Give it a few more listens, and crucially turn it up in volume, and then see what you think, because it's you know, it's grown on me from being a close second to I mean, it's close. I still would say I would rate these similarly, really. You know, there's swings and roundabouts to it, but you know, undoubtedly more resolution, more dynamics, more detail, more separation, and the original just a slightly more kind of homogeneous, natural, full-bodied kind of sound. Okay, but it's an amazing album. I have got absolutely no regrets whatsoever about buying this Atlantic 75th anniversary version from Analogue Productions, and they will sit alongside each other on the shelf, same as my Landmines Down on Broadways are, and I'll enjoy them both. What happens when Foxtrot comes, which I think is next month? No, it's not. No, Trick of the Tail's next month. Now, Trick of the Tail, I'm really looking forward to. Foxtrot, that's a different one, because you've got to split in half Supper's Ready, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to handle that, frankly. Having to turn the side over at the end of the musical box, and then again, you know, halfway through the second side of the regular album, it really doesn't bother me on this. Really doesn't bother me at all. But I might not say the same about Foxtrot. You know, similarly with Yes, when we get to Close to the Edge, I'm interested to hear what the 45 treatment will do to it in terms of resolution and dynamics and all that kind of stuff. But whether it's something I regularly play will be, you know, we'll have to wait and see on those. But anyway, Genesis, Nursery Cryme, Analogue Productions, 75th anniversary of Atlantic Records. It's absolutely phenomenal. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you all again very soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye now. Bye.